ஹலோ எவ்ரிவன், வெல்கம் டு மை சேனல். இன்றைக்கி நம்ம என்ன பார்க்க போகிறோம்னா, சிகாகோ ட்ராவல் vlogல அடுத்தது ஆர்கிடெக்சர் டூர் தான் நான் உங்களுக்கு காமிக்க போகிறேன். ஆர்கிடெக்சர் டூர் என்னன்னு நீங்கள் கேட்டிங்கன்னா, லேக் ஓரமாக இருக்கிற ஃபேமஸ் பில்டிங்கு, பெரிய பெரிய பில்டிங் பற்றி தான் இந்த ஹோல் டூர்லேயுமே சொல்ல போகிறாங்க. இதை வந்து நான் பார்ட்டாக போட்டிருக்கேன். ஒவ்வொரு நாள் ஒவ்வொரு பார்ட் போடுவேன். அதை நீங்கள் பார்த்து என்ஜாய் பண்ணுங்கள். அந்த லேக்கில் நாங்கள் எப்படி போனோம்னா, க்ரூஸில் போனோம். க்ரூஸ்னால் அங்கே வந்து போட்டில் வந்து ஒரு கம்பெனி வந்து ஒரு போட் எடுத்து நிறையா பேரை வச்சு கூப்பிட்டு போவாங்க. அவங்க தான் உங்களுக்கு எக்ஸ்பிளைன் பண்ணுவாங்க உங்களுக்கு வந்து எப்படியெல்லாம் இருக்குங்கிறத. அதை நீங்கள் பார்த்து என்ஜாய் பண்ணுங்கள்.
With a little Chicago history, it's always a good way to begin. Specifically, let's talk about the founding of this city. And one of the big reasons Chicago exists is because of where we are located. So we're on Lake Michigan and the Chicago River. And this river is part of the waterway that connects the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico. Now, it's not entirely a natural connection. They had to build a canal to complete it. And they did that in 1848. So that's when the Illinois and Michigan Canal was completed. Basically what they did, they connected the south branch of the Chicago River 100 miles down to the Illinois River, which connects the Mississippi River straight on down the Gulf of Mexico. We became this booming port city. Started getting our first train line, so it was that combination, river and rails, that brought people and commerce to and through the city, and we grew very quickly. Started with a population about 3,000 in 1837. By the year 1890, had a population of over 1 billion. Nowadays, we had about 2.7 billion in the city. Now, of course, there were people here long before the founding. In fact, over 10,000 years ago, the ancestors of the Native Americans would have made their way to this area. Now, over time, some of the more prominent Native American tribes to be here included the Fox, the Illinois, the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. Late 1700s, this area had its first non-native settler. His name, Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable. Now, du Sable, he was of African and French descent. Born in Haiti, he came to the Chicago region in 1779, and he built a trading post and a homestead very close to where we pass under the Michigan Avenue Bridge. So the city honors him as being the founder or father of Chicago because he kind of started the settlement that grew into Chicago. So he's honored in a variety of ways. The Michigan Avenue Bridge is named for him, the Museum of African American History, and then just a month ago, this roadway we're passing underneath got an updated name. It is now Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable Lakeshore Drive. So like I said, that's kind of a big old crash course in some of that early Chicago history. We'll get to some other history later on, kind of talk about some of the stories that define the city. But right now, we are about to enter into an architectural museum. So we're going to be seeing buildings on this tour from the 1890s all the way up to ones that are brand new. So if you're taking photos tonight, you're going to get your first big impressive shot down the river here with a not at all ominous sky behind it. So let's begin telling stories. It's the third tallest in the city. That also just so happens to be the tallest building in the world designed by a female architect. Her name is Jeannie Gang. She's a Chicago designer. She does really amazing things. The way this building appears to kind of bend and curve. Now, in reality, those curves are achieved by the way the windows angle. They kind of go in one direction, and then they alternate, going the opposite way, and then there's alternating angles underneath of the building. Now, this is a building, though, that was going to have issues with the strong Chicago winds. So they were worried it was going to rock back and forth too much. So it has a feature in it known as a blow-proof. If you look up at the tallest of the three towers, you will find there's a hole in this building. 2 empty floors, wind passes through, that takes pressure off the facade, eliminates a lot of the sway it might have had. That's the first building in Chicago to use that feature. Now, if you notice the ropes hanging off, those do not stabilize it. That's for the hanging scaffolding system. They're still doing work on the outside of the building fairly often, so for now, they've just kept the ropes pulled down and away when they're not using them. Now, most of that is condos, basically from the 14th floor all the way up. The lower section, that's where the St. Regents Hotel is going. Now, they are still working on that part of the building, but that's where it gets its name. Had a few different names during construction. It was the Wanda Vista, and then just the Vista, and then the St. Regents right before it opened up. Oh, fine, okay. Yeah, okay. Anyways, Over here to the left. Step back here, we're going to see another Genie Gang design. So step back here in a moment, coming into better views, this building with these curving white balconies, the Aqua Tower from 2009. So as you look at that, notice the way the balconies bend in and out from each other, they wrap around the edges. So for a lot of people, that looks pretty nice from down here. It also gives you these really nice views from the building itself. Whether you have a condo in there, maybe you stay in the hotel in the lower levels, you get these unique angles in the city just by the uniqueness of each balcony. And Aqua was Genie Gang's very first skyscraper design, 2009. It won a couple of awards when it premiered. I would not be surprised if the St. Regents, her newest design, wins a few as well this year. In fact, I'd be pretty disappointed. Full disclosure, Gang is one of my favorite favorite architects of skyscrapers here in the city. Now, we are moving on from, we started with the third tallest building. Let's talk about the second tallest building in the city. Directly in front of us, the Trump International Hotel and Tower from 2009. This is over 1,300 feet tall, which includes the Spire on top. 98 stories. Now, this has some unique design features. First of all, the setbacks, where it kind of gets thinner as it rises. The first setback lines up the main structure of the white building to its right, whereas the third setback lines up the black building to its left. Also has that kind of silver blue color scheme. Well, that's a transition between the white and black on either side. So the architect of the Trump Tower, that's Adrian Smith, he very much describes this as contextual design. Now that's a style of architecture, contextualism, where you use the world around it to kind of fit into and influence your design choices. And it is a mixed-use building, condos, hotel, indoor parking garage, and then some retail space down at the bottom. One of those buildings that Smith wanted to honor there to the right with the clock tower, one of the classic icons of the city, the Wrigley building. Now the Wrigley was completed in 1924. That clock tower is modeled after the Giralda Tower in Seville, Spain. So this is done in what's called a Spanish revivalist style. Now, revivalist architecture, basically what it does, you look towards the past and you kind of copy from it. A lot of American architects back in the early 20th century, they were still looking towards Europe. Popular buildings in Europe, often those very ornate cathedrals, towers, palaces. So you make an American skyscraper that looks similar. And it was built for Wrigley Chewing Gum. They're not in there anymore. They sold it just about 11 years ago. But when they sold it, they included a clause in the contract. The building's name can never change. So that will forever be the Wrigley building. Now, as we come out from under the bridge here, take a look directly to your left. You'll see some Greco-Roman revivalist design. The building with the columns running across the top. That dates to 1923, originally an office tower. Now it is part of the London House Hotel. And then you follow a little further to your left in the distance, another ornate building, dome on top, little temple structures on the corners. That dates to 1927. One of the interesting things about that building, when it opened, inside, there was an automobile elevator. In 1927, you could drive a car into an elevator in that building, have it hoisted up to nearly any floor in the main structure. That was for convenience and safety. You wouldn't have to transfer your valuables down the street. See the original name for the building? The Jewelers Building. They really wanted jewelry companies to move in. So of course a very ornate design, but they also had some of those state-of-the-art safety features. Oh, another safety feature, the temples on the corners originally housed giant water tanks. Yeah, that was for the fire suppression system. It's always good to emphasize fire safety in a city that's famous for burning down. We'll talk about that more later on there. Right now I'm just going to put on my jacket very quickly. I'm hoping it just sprinkles, but if I don't have a jacket on, it will definitely tempt fate and, come pour down on me. And I got to use my hands so I can PowerPoint. Over here to the right, here you got these two spiral towers. These are collectively known as Marina City, affectionately referred to as the Corncob Towers. And those were completed in 1964, designed by Bertrand Goldberg. Now, Goldberg, he was designing at a time in the city when boxy architecture was really prominent. But he clearly went in a different direction. In fact, he said he was revolting against the straight line. He felt buildings should feel more natural, so he tried to keep them more curve-focused. But he also designed this to have a lot of different elements to it. Down in the bottom, you got the marina, then you have restaurants, parking garages, residences, some other buildings. Part of it included an office tower as well as a movie theater, built to be a city within a city. That's because back in the 1960s, there weren't necessarily a lot of people living right near the heart of downtown Chicago. So Goldberg designed the complex to have all these amenities, all these features, so you could live, work, and play. By the way, if you have an image of a car flying out of the parking garage of Marina City into the river, that has happened. Spoiler, the movie's called The Hunter. It's from the early 80s, old Steve McQueen movie. I don't know if it's the greatest movie ever, but they got some really great stunts in it. In real life, they've always had valet parking in those garages. They're pros. They'll take care of your car. Don't you worry. Now, speaking of cars, let's talk a little bit about our bridges, because we will pass underneath over 20 bridges on the tour tonight. And these are all movable, so these all go up and down. Most of them are what's called Trunnion Vascular bridges. So Vascular is French for teeter-totter or seesaw. So with this style of bridge, they split in the middle. Got these big heavy counterweights on either end, which hang below. And then with the assistance of motors, these go up less than a minute. So it's a very efficient design. Now, originally these would have went up for the big shipping and passenger lines on the river. Nowadays, they mainly go up for recreational sailboats. That happens kind of on either end of the summer. We get the spring and then the fall bridge lift season. That'll start up again. It should be starting up in September. And basically what happens for a couple days a week for a few months, the bridges go up, allowing sailboats to pass through. The sailboats have to come through kind of on a schedule. They all do it as one big group. And the bridges lift up one or two at a time for them. So it actually takes a few hours to do the process. So like I said, that'll start back up again in September. But continuing on here with the buildings, just on the other side of the Wells Street Bridge over there to the right, you're going to see it's kind of a tan-colored building, and it is massive, the Merchandise Mart. Now, when this opened in 1930, it was the largest building in the world. It has over 4 million square feet of space. It takes up 2 entire city blocks, and at one point, had its own zip code. Designed by the architectural firm Graham, Anderson, Probst & White, this is a great example of Art Deco design. Now, Art Deco, very popular 1920s and 30s. For architecture, a common feature is that you design your buildings with these inset windows. And what those do, they create these long lines running up the side of the building. Our eyes kind of naturally follow those lines skyward. So it kind of streamlines the design, emphasizes its verticality. You also may notice there's these heads on the pillars down towards the bottom. Those are Giants of retail, whereas some call them the giant Pez dispensers. They're really what you got there, people like Sears, Woolworth, Field, among others. That last one, Marshall Field's big retail giant that was once here, this building was built as a wholesale facility for the company. And we'll talk more about the history of the building when we pass by again later on. Just so you know, we pass by everything twice tonight. So if you don't like the look going one way, we get another look going back upriver, and there's a few buildings that get a little brighter once it gets darker and their lights really start to show up. So I kind of save them for when we come back upriver. But right now we are coming to Wolf Point. So this is where the 3 branches of the Chicago River are meeting up. We're on the main branch, South Branch to our left, North Branch to our right. A lot of new buildings have gone up here lately, including directly to our right of the blue tower, the white highlights. That is Wolf Point East. It's a new condo tower, just opened up last year. Next door to it, under construction, is the Salesforce Tower. Now that is ultimately going to be a 60-story office building. It will be slightly shorter than Salesforce's corporate headquarters out in California, which is probably the right choice. Now, take a look right in front of us. You got the building with the curved top and bottom. This is River Point, or as I like to call it, the giant hot pocket. Yeah, you see it. That's an office tower from 2017. It includes a 1.5 acre public plaza facing the river. However, most of this plaza is elevated. That's because train lines pass underneath. In fact, in those white walls, there are fans to vent exhaust. You also may notice that red spire-like sculpture on the plaza. That was just added last year. Designed by world-renowned architect Santiago Calatrava. Now, Calatrava does not have a building in the city. He was supposed to. The Chicago Spire would have been one of the tallest buildings in the world, and then it ran into the recession of 2008. So even though they'd started working on it, they never completed it, and there are no plans to do so. So Calatrava, very excited to have that added. Now, you take a look right in front of us here, and you will see a raised railroad bridge. Now, this is from 1908. All right, so this raised railroad bridge right in front of us, it is from 1908. Back then we had all these different factories and warehouses around the river, so they needed a freight line crossing. By 2000, most of those had shut down. So at that point, the bridge was retired, became a landmark, always in the upright position. Except for once a year. It's lowered, so the train company can run something across it to maintain their federal right-of-way. That's essentially a use it or lose it rule. The bridge goes down, and a truck that lowers the tracks runs across. Stays up the rest of the year, partially because boats, especially the double-decker ones, can't fit underneath it. It has a low clearance. And then just across from it, there to the left, you got this, it's kind of a pinkish rectangular building. That is the oldest building on the tour, 1898. Now, this started as a warehouse, eventually a cold storage warehouse, 1980s turned into Fulton House, residential building. This was not an easy conversion. They had to add in all the balconies, most of the windows into these walls that are 4 feet thick. They also had to defrost the building for about 3 months. Yeah, cold storage. A lot of ice buildup over the decades. And that remodel or adaptive reuse was actually done by the architect Harry Weiss. He also is the designer of these very unique gray townhomes here to the left. These are the river cottages. Now, as we get closer here, check out the porthole-shaped windows, triangular sail-shaped roofs. Harry Weiss, when designing those in the late 80s, he didn't just embrace the river with those nautical themes, he also embraced the river simply by facing the building towards it. Prior to that, not a very common thing to do. So some of the most unique townhomes you're going to find anywhere in the city. Now, coming up on the other side of Kinsey Street here, I'm actually going to turn off my microphone for a couple minutes. That's because over here we like to give you just a little breather, a little break from the action. It's going to have a chance to relax more than you're already relaxing, a chance to talk amongst yourselves, chance to visit Felipe at the bar if you're feeling thirsty, and it's also a chance if you got any questions. I had a couple minutes where I can kind of walk around and take those. And what's going to happen here, our captain, he's going to rotate the vessel so we can turn and head towards the south branch of the river. So many great things to check out down there. So sit back, relax, and if you got any questions right now, just raise your hand or yell, "Hey Jake." I respond to either for the next couple minutes.